Hey there! Today I'm going to talk a little bit about using the self as a canvas in ritual. And in this case, the way I'm doing that is with mud, which I will be using as body paint. The concept of decorating one's body with ritual symbols, communicative images, dates back thousands of years and is a common feature among a huge number of cultures. And frequently, the paint or imagery itself has some form of meaning, but so too does the act of applying it. And in the case of the ritual that I'm going to be using this mud for, the application itself, I think, is really front and center. While I chat, you'll see me mixing various muds, and I'll be using ahava, Dead Sea mud, as my base, and then modifying that mud. And this process is as simple as separating the mud into smaller containers and then adding different things to each one, whether that involves thinning the mud, for instance with storm water, that is rainwater collected during a thunderstorm, coffee, sugar, salt, or any non-toxic herb. Now you do want to make sure it's non-toxic because toxic compounds can be absorbed transdermally sometimes. And in creating all of these different variations, charging the different muds you create with different intentions or energies, you are essentially building yourself an artist's palette with which to work in ritual. And this can be a palette that you plan out ahead of time, but that's certainly not necessary. This is one of those fun things that you can actually do while flying by the seat of your pants. And although I've given some thought to a few of these muds, ones that I know for certain I want to use, for the rest I'm just letting inspiration guide me, and whether I use them or not isn't that big a deal. Now any mud you acquire commercially, and well, it's winter here, so commercial is the way to go, but going out and just finding mud on your own is entirely valid and something I wholeheartedly support and will be doing when I get the chance. It's as easy as dredging up some silt from the bottom of a lake. And having spent quite a lot of time in that sort of silty lake growing up, come summer I'm absolutely doing that. Now the norm when it comes to spreading mud over your body in the context of a spa day is to take it as is, spread it everywhere, let it dry, and then shower it off. But in the case of the ritual that I'll be doing using this mud, that's obviously not the route I'm going to take. Instead, I'm going to prepare a series of different muds and then touch them, use them, apply them to my body during every step of my ritual, from calling elemental energies to anointing myself in honor of divinity before getting down to the actual work that I will be doing. And the core of this work truly is telling a story, creating a sigil by painting my own body, by applying these various muds in a pattern that reflects my intention and can illuminate my relationship with the archetype that I'll be working with. Now there are a slew of ways to create sigils and a ton of texts that deal with this process. And so I'd simply like to raise a few options when one is talking about using one's body as a means of creating a sigil. Here are a few things you can keep in mind in order to help inspire you do something similar if the mood strikes you. So first off, before you start, you obviously have to make the decision of how much of your body is fair game for this. I'm going to be working in the nude, which obviously maximizes one's options. Just as planets, geography, or various landscapes have particular associations, correspond to different ideas and feelings, so too do different parts of anatomy. Even if you've never formally trained on these topics or given it much thought, it doesn't take much effort to figure out that we do associate different parts of our bodies with particular things. And so when using your body as a canvas, you can take advantage of those existing associations when building your mud paint story. Concepts of communication and teaching may be associated with the lips, or one's dominant hand, the hand one writes with. Sexual energy would be associated with, take a guess. You're probably going to get this right. Now, one thing I'll note is with mud from any source, you want to be working externally, but there is plenty of external and non-sensitive real estate, particularly if you're a woman, that you can associate with romance, love, sexual energy. But you're not limited to these obvious associations either. You can go a little bit more abstract. And you can tap into any concept that speaks to you, regardless of whether it's popularly held or commonly associated with a particular idea or ideal. For instance, I shattered my knee rather spectacularly about a decade ago while wakeboarding. And thanks to a most excellent surgeon, it's in great shape today despite the scars. But now my right knee is a great physiological representation for recovery from trauma. A scar I acquired during my wayward youth may represent feelings of being lost or experiencing low self-value. And in ritual, those areas will be dedicated to that phase of my life, those concepts. But say you don't want to dedicate particular areas of anatomy to particular ideas. Well, you can just as easily treat your body, the length of your body, as a temporal scale, starting at your feet, the foundation from which you grew and developed, using the muds to paint the story of your life as you progress. And as you move from one phase of your life to the next, you can shift between muds, moving from one overarching energy to another. Having said that, this is ritual, it's craft, and you're not limited to acting the historian any more than you're limited to a 2D map. And so while you chart perhaps the history that you've experienced, you are well within your rights and your means to then redraw that experience, to reach back in time and reframe what happened with the balance and the wisdom that you've accrued since then. Now you can do this either by literally wiping away the mud or by allowing one mud to harden, which will cause it to lighten, and then switching to another mud, and then overwriting, layering over top of that first mud with new, fresh, wet mud. Now here, a practical consideration or two. The thickness of the mud that you place on your body is going to determine how rapidly it dries. But so too is the consistency of that mud. If you thin it down with water, it'll obviously take longer. If you want to maximize color differences, you can incorporate things like ground coffee, which will darken the mud, or even mica powders. I will warn you though, if you haven't worked with micas before, you want to test this because it would be very easy for you to end up staining your skin for a few days and then you're walking around with finger paintings on you at the office. If rather than revisiting past events, what you're interested in doing is exploring current influences in your life, I'd like to suggest that some of the things to think about are not just where you place different muds, but what the areas of fusion look like. Where do two different muds meet? How do they meet? Do they blend with one another? Is there a stark line? What energies in you flow? Which ones keep to themselves? Where are there voids, empty spaces that aren't filled? Is there a mud that represents toxicity? If so, where is it? And what other energy will you use to encroach upon and ultimately retake that space? I'd also like to ask that you consider who really is doing the drawing in any of these cases. Are you painting yourself while looking down at your body? Are you painting yourself while looking in a mirror? And what would happen if you called something else into that mirror, evoked a guide, and granted them permission to communicate with you through your own hands? Now, this last approach is the one I'll be using. A full-length mirror, a darkened room, and an invitation to share what they will with me through touch and mud. Now, if you're getting the sense that this is a little bit sensual, you're not wrong. This is obviously a very tactile ritual that is at least as much about the experience as it is the outcome. It is, in a very true sense, body magic, and includes a level of material involvement that surpasses the norm in my practice. Now, there is a final means of creating voids in the muds that you apply to yourself. and that is, instead of purposeful removal, allowing the mud to dry, and then using motion to introduce cracks, to break off pieces, and thereby create a sort of visual map for the action that you've engaged in. Now, because mud will be drying over the course of your ritual, from a practical standpoint, you probably don't want to be doing this on carpet, any place overly precious where you'd be afraid to get a little mud here or there. But if you're working on some sort of hard, smooth surface, like a hardwood floor or tile, not only will it be easy cleanup, you've got the added advantage of being able to collect some of that mud that flaked off for some later use, some later purpose. Now, the end of my ritual is going to involve a bath, which will help get all of that mud off me. And that water, too, now infused with the tone and achievement of ritual, can be collected and used. Which is to say that by the end of my bath, I can expect both silky smooth skin and a material that will embody the relationship I'll have forged with the entity I'll be evoking during this ritual. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video and that you found some inspiration. If you have any questions or you decide to give this a shot, I'd love to hear from you. And until next time, I hope you have a fantastic night.